Welcome back to the world of boring history for sleep, where the past is slow, repetitive, quietly unpleasant, and somehow deeply relaxing. Tonight, we journey into the quiet agony of medieval daily life. Not the wars, not the knights, not the royal intrigues, but the long, dragging rhythm of being a regular person in a world without comfort, without choices, and without toothpaste. We will begin with a day in the life of a medieval peasant. Not a special day, just a normal one. A sunrise like all the others. A routine so fixed it could put even the most stubborn insomniac to rest. So fluff your pillow, let your breath slow, and drift gently into a world where every day felt like the one before and the one after. Let your body relax. Breathe slowly. Now drift backwards in time. You are not royalty. You are not a knight, or a monk, or a merchant. You're not even a skilled tradesman. You are a medieval peasant, and your day is about to begin. But first, you wake up. If you can call it waking, it's more like coming to. Drifting from cold, restless half-sleep into a slow awareness that your limbs are stiff, the air is cold, and your back is sore. You're lying on a sack stuffed with straw. Not fresh straw. It's flattened from use, musty from damp, and likely shared by fleas. There is no mattress, just the straw on a creaky wooden board or laid straight on the hard-packed dirt floor. Beneath it, the earth is cold, even in summer. You slept in your clothes. Everyone does. No one has enough garments to justify changing out of them at night. You wear a coarse linen shirt and a scratchy wool tunic. They smell faintly of smoke, sweat, and time. The house, if you can call it that, is a one-room cottage built from timber, mud, straw, and prayers. The roof leaks when it rains. The walls don't stop the wind. There are gaps you've stuffed with tufts of hay, bits of cloth, and cracked wood. You plug holes as best you can, but the cold finds its way in anyway. You share the space with your family. Your mother and father sleep on one side. You, your brothers, and your younger sister curl together like hounds on the other. One of the pigs is inside the house too. That's normal. So are the chickens. The animals bring body heat in winter and noise all year round. The floor is layered with straw to soak up spills. There's no flooring, no rugs. Just dirt, packed hard from years of footsteps. There is no chamber pot, no indoor privy. If you need to relieve yourself, you go outside, into the wind, past the goose pen, to the edge of the path. If you're lucky, you use the communal trench dug last spring. If not, anywhere dry will do. The hearth is in the center of the room, sunken slightly below floor level. It is the heart of the home, and last night it glowed warmly. But now it is cold. The fire has gone out. Ash sits quietly in the stone basin, gray and soft like snow. You see a faint curl of smoke clinging to the past. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof where the smoke goes out. On clear nights, it also lets in stars. On stormy nights, rain. You reach for your shoes. They are leather, stiff with damp. One is missing a lace. You slip them on anyway. There's a small hole near the toe. You pretend not to notice. The rooster calls. Not once, like in stories, but constantly. He's been crowing on and off since deep night. A signal not for sunrise, but for obligation. Time to begin. You crouch near the hearth and begin the first job of the day, making fire. You gently stack dried twigs, a twist of straw, and the last scrap of yesterday's kindling. Then you strike flint against steel. Once, twice, 3 times. The spark is small, but it lands. A thin thread of smoke curls upward. You lean close and breathe life into it. Softly, slowly, the glow spreads, then flickers into flame. You feel its warmth on your hands, like the touch of someone remembering you. Now, the cottage begins to stir. Your father clears his throat, a low rasp, deep in the chest. Your sister murmurs in her sleep. A chicken hops down from its perch and scratches at the floor. Your mother groans softly. The baby stirs. The fire catches fully now. Orange light spreads across the walls. It dances on the beams. It flickers against the cooking pot, the wooden bowls, and the bent ladle you inherited from your grandmother. The day has begun, not with bells, not with music, but with smoke, sore knees, and cold fingers. You rise slowly, already tired. There is no time for reflection, no moment of peace. The work begins before your eyes are fully open. Wood must be chopped, water fetched, bread prepared, tools checked, animals fed, orders obeyed, and no one is coming to help. You're not on a quest. You're not on a journey. You're not special. You are a medieval peasant. You live to work, and you work to survive. Tomorrow will be no different. The fire is crackling now, gently but stubbornly, coaxed back to life by your practiced hands. You feed it with dried twigs and slivers of bark shaved from last year's firewood stack, which, if you're lucky, isn't already damp from the previous rain. If it is, the smoke will stay low and thick in the cottage, clinging to every surface, including your lungs. With the fire warming the space, breakfast can begin. But don't imagine eggs and bacon or fresh bread and honey. There's no milk unless the cow calved recently. No butter unless it was churned earlier this week. And you'd remember, because churning takes hours. Today's breakfast, like most mornings, is what's left of what's left. You reach for the pot, squat, soot-stained, iron-bellied, and lift the lid. Inside is yesterday's pottage, a thick, lumpy stew of grains and water, sometimes with cabbage or leeks, if any were spared from dinner. Sometimes with herbs, if it's spring. Sometimes with turnips, if you're desperate. But always, always, the same color. Brownish, grayish, uncertain. You stir it gently with a wooden spoon. It clings to the edges. Thick, coagulated, bland, but edible. You scrape the pot and add a bit more water. Maybe a pinch of salt. If you're lucky, though salt isn't cheap, and what little you had was already used to preserve the meat your family never sees. There is no yeast bread this morning. Flat barley cakes will have to do. You made them last night from leftover mash and cooked them on a flat stone near the fire. They're hard this morning. One cracked when you picked it up. You chew it anyway. It takes time. It's quiet work. Sometimes, if you're fortunate, there's a leftover onion to share. It's sharp. It bites the tongue, but it breaks up the monotony of grain, and more grain. You peel it carefully, thin layer by thin layer. Nothing is wasted. Even onion skin can flavor water when boiled. A jug of weak ale sits nearby, not because you're celebrating, but because the water isn't safe. It's barely fermented, just enough to keep the parasites at bay. You drink it slowly, not because you savor it, but because that's all there is. There is no sugar, no fruit, no hot tea, no mugs. You drink from a shared wooden cup, passed around the family like a solemn ceremony. You eat quietly. There's no table, just the ground, or maybe a low board resting across two stools. Your little sister picks at her pottage. She doesn't complain, because complaining doesn't change what's in the pot. Your father eats steadily, without speaking. He has eaten this same breakfast for 40 years. So did his father before him. So will you. The fire pops. Outside, you hear the wind press against the shutters. A few birds chirp, faint and far. A cart will squeaks in the distance. Someone heading toward the Lord's field early. You'll be going too. There's a strange comfort in the simplicity, in the slow silence, in the sameness. You know exactly what this meal will taste like. You know how long it takes to chew. You know how it will sit in your belly. And you know what comes next. The bowl is empty now. You scrape the sides. You lick the spoon, not because it tastes good, but because you cannot afford to waste a single bite. Your mother pours the last dregs of the pottage back into the pot for later. You'll eat it again tonight, perhaps with a new root vegetable added. Perhaps not. Someone has to fetch water for washing up. Someone else will carry wood for the next fire. Everyone is already rising to go about their work. Breakfast is over. It was quiet, humble, and above all short. And the day hasn't even begun. The village stirs. Roosters echo from different yards, overlapping in a kind of ragged chorus. Distant dogs bark at nothing in particular. Someone is already chopping wood, a dull thud repeating like a heartbeat beneath the wind. You finish your last sip of weak ale and pull your cloak tighter. It doesn't fasten properly. The brooch broke last winter, so you use a leather strap. It still works, though the wind always finds its way in. You step outside. The door is little more than a timber slab on rusted hinges. It creaks open and closed like a groaning tooth. No lock, no handle, just a latch, and the knowledge that there's nothing inside worth stealing. The morning greets you with cold, damp air and a sky the color of wet wool. The earth squelches beneath your feet. Puddles dot the path. The village lane is little more than a series of ruts, shaped by carts, hooves, and generations of trudging feet. You walk past a few thatched cottages, just like yours. Smoke rises from some. Others remain dark. The blacksmith's forge is still quiet, but the miller's boy is already heading toward the stream with a bucket. You don't walk toward your own field. That would be too easy. Instead, like every tenant in this village, you walk to the Lord's land, the domain. Before you eat from your own harvest, before you plow your own soil, you work for someone else. Always. First, the domain fields stretch across the hill just beyond the manor. They're larger than yours. Flatter, better drained, more fertile. That's not an accident. They get the best land. You get what's left. You reach the boundary marked by a series of stones, half buried and moss-covered. You and a handful of others gather at the edge, tools in hand. Some carry wooden hoes. Others bear rakes, spades, or crude sickles wrapped in cloth. You nod silently to one another. No one speaks much this early. The reeve arrives next, the local overseer, chosen from among the peasants, but loyal to the manor. He doesn't wear armor. He's not a knight, but he holds a small staff, marked with rings. That's enough to show authority. He reads out the day's instructions, not from parchment, but from memory. You will clear thistles from the northern edge. You will dig a new drainage channel. You will stack the harvested sheaves into tight rows. You won't be paid. You won't be thanked, but you will be expected. The work begins. You press the hoe into the soil. It's still heavy with last night's rain, and each thrust brings up clumps of cold, sticky earth. Thistles tear at your sleeves. Stones jar the blade. Your hands ache after only a few minutes. You find a rhythm. Left. Push. Right. Pull. Shake off the dirt. Repeat. There's nothing romantic about it. No golden sunrise. No birdsong serenade. Just the dull, back-breaking repetition of work you never chose for land you don't own. Children are gathering manure from the edge of the path. They carry it in baskets. One boy trips, and the basket spills. He doesn't cry, just picks it up quietly. There's no use in making noise. The manor itself stands in the distance, a timber hall surrounded by a wooden palisade. It's not a castle, no moats or stone towers, just a slightly bigger house, occupied by someone with rights you will never have. By mid-morning, your shoulders are tight. Your back burns. Your stomach growls again. You remember that breakfast was thin today, more water than meal. You wish you had brought a bit of bread, but there wasn't any left. The reeve walks the line, inspecting the work. He doesn't smile, just nods at those who are keeping pace and frowns at those who aren't. You don't want to be in the second group. Falling behind means extra duties, or worse, a fine you can't pay. So you press on. Thistles, rocks, wet earth. The cycle continues. You glance toward your own field. Not far away, just past the ridge. Weeds are taking root there, but you can't tend it yet. Not until the Lord's land is finished. And it never is. By the time the sun is overhead, you're caked in mud. You stretch your back and feel something pop in your spine. You're not old, but medieval work makes everyone feel old, eventually. There's no choice, no escape, just duty. And tomorrow, it will all repeat. The sun is barely past its peak, but the hours feel heavy already. Your legs are tired, your hands raw, and the tools in those hands. They aren't making things easier. The plow waits in the shed, if you're lucky enough to own one. More likely, it belongs to the entire village, shared among households and used in turns. The plow itself is wooden, with an iron tip if fortune has smiled on your community. Not sharp, not sleek, just sturdy enough to slice through the earth if the soil isn't too dry or too wet. You guide the plow with effort. It isn't heavy on its own, but when it hits a buried rock, the shock shudders up your arms. When it catches on a root, it halts abruptly, and you lurch forward. You curse under your breath. Not out of anger, out of habit. Everyone does. The oxen, if you have them, pull slowly. Their harnesses are made from wood and rope, padded with worn leather. They creak with every step. If you can't afford oxen, or the neighbors haven't lent theirs, you pull the plow yourself. One person pulls, another pushes. Your back screams. Your hands blister. The furrow is shallow, but it's better than nothing. Everything is done by hand. Everything. You rake the furrows with a simple wooden rake. Its teeth worn, one or two missing. When you lean on it, the handle flexes, and you hope it won't snap. Replacements are rare, and what takes time to shape. No nails. No factory parts. Only what the forest gives. You carry a sickle on your belt, the most personal of tools. Its curved iron blade is dull now, and sharpening it takes time. A whetstone can smooth the edge, but only if you have the strength left to use it. You use the sickle to cut long grass, to harvest barley, to slice weeds from the edges of the field. Every motion risks a cut. You've known people who've sliced their hands open by accident. A simple wound like that, left untreated, can turn deadly. There are hoes for breaking soil, long, awkward, blunted with use. You swing one again and again, clearing roots from the edge of your plot. Your shoulders throb. The hoe splinters where your calloused hands grip it. You feel every jolt in your elbows. Even the humble spade is an ordeal. Not a sharp shovel like those used today, but a flat wooden blade reinforced with iron, often passed down from your father. You press it into the soil with your foot. Sometimes it sinks easily. Sometimes it bends. Sometimes it won't bite at all, and you have to stomp again and again just to break the surface. There's no wheelbarrow. You carry soil and stones in a basket or a sack, or with your bare hands. You don't think of efficiency. You think of necessity. One handful at a time, one row at a time. And the tools don't help with the blisters. They don't help with your aching knees. They don't help when your fingernails are black with dirt and the sunburn peels from your neck. They help you survive, but they never help you rest. Even your body becomes a tool. Your arms pull. Your back bends. Your legs haul. Your breath rises in short bursts with each lift. And when your muscles burn, you simply keep going, because stopping isn't an option. Not unless you want to fall behind. Not unless you're willing to risk losing next season's yield. You wonder what it would be like to work with a machine, something with gears or strength that didn't come from your bones. But those are dreams, and dreams are for priests and poets. You are a peasant, and you work with what you have. Every tool hurts. Every motion wears you down. But you keep going, because it's what your father did, and his father before him. And that's what it means to survive the Middle Ages. The shadows are growing longer now. Your arms ache. The hem of your tunic is crusted in dried mud. And finally, after hours of toil on the Lord's land, you're released to tend your own field. It's not far, just beyond the hedgerow, a narrow strip of soil bordered by another peasant's plot on either side, and even narrower than you remember it. Each year, the furrows shift. The edges blur. Disputes over boundaries are common, but they never end in your favor. This is your strip. It is long and thin and tired. The soil here isn't the best. The richer loam lies up the slope, where the manor's crops are already sprouting in neat rows. Down here, it's heavier, packed, weedy, lacking nutrients. But it's yours, at least until the taxes come due. You stand for a moment, taking it in. The field is maybe an acre, a patchwork of exhaustion. There are no fences, no markers beyond memory, and perhaps a stone or two buried in the grass. It was divided generations ago, split and resplit among families until all that's left is this: a few ragged furrows, bent like ribs. And now you must coax food from it. You reach for your hoe again. It's heavier than before, simply because you're more tired now. The soil fights back. It's compacted from last season's storms. Still full of stones. Still unwilling. But you work slowly, not because you can, but because there's no other way. Every handful of weeds pulled is one less competitor for moisture. Every stone cleared is one less to jam your spade tomorrow. It's slow work, but the kind that makes the difference between a winter with grain and a winter with hunger. You pause to adjust your belt. A bit of rope, frayed from repeated use. There's no time to rest. Not yet. You dig, pull, pat, clear. One row becomes two, then three. The sun sinks lower. Shadows stretch longer. Around you, other peasants are doing the same. No one speaks. The air is filled with the soft hiss of raking, the dull thunk of spades, the occasional grunt of effort. It's a strange kind of peace, not joyful, but shared. Each person locked in their own quiet battle with the land, hoping for enough food to trade, to store, to survive. This is subsistence farming, not abundance, not prosperity, just enough. If the weather holds, if the pests stay away, if the rains come, but not too early and not too hard. Everything depends on forces you can't control. Sometimes, if there's enough labor, you rotate crops, peas, barley, maybe oats. Sometimes you leave one strip fallow, letting it rest. But often, there's no choice. You plant every inch you can, even if it weakens the soil more with every passing year. Your hands are black now, dirt under your nails, your skin stained. Your back is bent, and still, there's more to do. At the far end of the plot is the bean trench, where your wife planted sprouting seeds 2 days ago. You check the soil there, pressing your fingers in gently. Still damp, still warm. That's a good sign. With luck, they'll break the surface by week's end. You glance toward the sky. Gray clouds are gathering. The wind shifts. Rain may be coming, and you haven't even started tending the small kitchen garden by the cottage. But you don't complain. This field, poor, rocky, underfed, is still the only thing that lets you feed your family. The manor takes its share. The reeve demands his cut. The tithe will soon be due. But what's left? That's yours. Or at least, yours to fight for. You press your palm to the earth one last time. It's warm now from your work, from your persistence. It's not much, but it's something. And in the Middle Ages, something is all you can hope for. Evening settles slowly, like a damp wool blanket draped across the sky. The light turns bronze, then pewter, then fades entirely, leaving only the faint orange glow from distant hearths. You return home. Your cottage stands crooked, as if leaning into the wind. It's made of wattle and daub, a rough lattice of which strips woven together, then plastered with mud, straw, and manure. The walls flake when it's dry, leak when it rains. The thatched roof is uneven, patched repeatedly with reeds from a nearby marsh. You duck to enter. The door frame barely clears your shoulder. There's no true door, just a wooden slab that scrapes the ground when opened. You push inside, and the air hits you. It smells of damp straw, smoke, and animal sweat. A fire smolders in the center of the single room. No chimney, just a smoke hole in the thatch, which doesn't always do its job. Tonight, the smoke hangs low, curling along the ceiling beams before rolling down the walls. It stings your eyes. You blink and breathe shallowly, used to the sting. The hearth isn't built into a stone structure. It's simply a circle of stones on the dirt floor, blackened and warm. A pot of something thin, maybe barley broth, simmers slowly. Your wife stirs it with a wooden spoon, glancing at you without words. There's nothing to say. You're both exhausted. The children are clustered in a corner, nestled into old cloaks and a pile of straw. One of them coughs, the kind of dry cough that never really goes away. You walk over and tousle their hair, gently. It's the only comfort you have time for. The walls are bare. Maybe a wooden bowl hangs near the door. Perhaps a small cloth icon, a token of luck or warding, stitched by someone long gone. There's no insulation. The wind finds its way in through the gaps, whispering between beams. You sit on a stool that creaks under your weight. It's one of only two in the cottage. Most sit on the floor or crouch near the fire. The smoke swirls lazily toward your face, and you wave it away half-heartedly. In the far corner, just beyond the glow of the hearth, is the livestock pen. It's not separate, not outside. The family shares space with the animals, a goat, maybe a piglet, or a few chickens, if they haven't been taken as tax. Their warmth helps in winter. Their smell, you simply get used to. There's no bed, not really. Just a raised platform of planks layered with straw, maybe a fur or rough blanket if fortune smiled on you last year. Everyone sleeps there together. No privacy, no comfort, just the knowledge that you'll rise before dawn and start again. The walls creak with the wind. The roof occasionally drops dust or bits of thatch. Rain sounds like 1,000 tiny feet overhead when it begins to fall, and it often does. You eat slowly. The broth is thin, but warm. It settles into your stomach like a small fire, the first real comfort of the day. Outside, the village quiets. Distant voices fade. A dog barks once, then nothing. Darkness presses against the slats of the shuttered window, though there's no glass to keep it out. Just wood, cracked and warped. You lie back at last, your body groaning with the stiffness of labor. You listen to the soft breathing of your family, the shuffling of the goat, the drip of rain through the thatch. You let the hearth's glow lull you, even as the smoke settles over your chest like a second blanket. This is home, not warm, not safe, not private, but yours for now. And in the Middle Ages, that's something to hold on to. You awaken before sunrise, again, not because you're rested, but because the sound of boots outside your door makes your stomach turn. The reeve has come early. The reeve is a peasant, like you, but not quite like you. He's been chosen by the Lord's steward to enforce the manorial dues, and that makes him more dangerous than any soldier. He carries a ledger, not a sword, and it's the ledger that does the most damage. He knocks twice. You open the door with a deep breath and a bowed head. You still owe for hens, he says flatly, before you've even said good morning. You nod, not because you agree, but because arguing won't change anything. You thought you'd already paid those hens last season, or maybe it was part of your tithe, or maybe those were for the spring tax. It's hard to say. The reeve says it's due, and that's that. Taxes in the Middle Ages are never simple. There are manorial taxes, paid in kind, eggs, grain, poultry, wool. There are labor dues, days when you work not for yourself, but for the Lord, for free. There are church tithes, which take 1/10 of your yield, even when there's little to yield. And if you live near a town or along a road, there are passage fees, tolls, market fees, mill fees. Even baking bread in your own oven might cost you, assuming you're allowed an oven. Sometimes you don't even know what you're being taxed for. One year it's a hearth tax for the fire you keep burning. Another year, it's a window tax. You don't even have windows. They call it feudal obligation. But to you, it just means you work all day and still come up short. The taxes aren't paid once a year. No, they come in waves. With the changing seasons, with new declarations from the manor, with surprise visits from collectors. Sometimes you pay in goods, sometimes in labor, and sometimes, when there's nothing left to give, you borrow. But there are no banks, only neighbors, or the church, or the merchant in the next village who lends grain at interest so steep it doubles within a season. One bad harvest, and you're not just poor, you're in debt. And debt is dangerous. Debt means you might lose your strip of land, or be forced to sell your oxen, or send your child into servitude for a term to work off the arrears. You tell yourself it's temporary, but time, in the Middle Ages, moves slowly. Debts last longer than memories. You return to the hearth and take stock. 2 hens left, a basket of barley, a few wrinkled apples from the corner bin. It's not enough. You'll have to trade or work it off, maybe help repair the Lord's fence or carry water to the manor. Another full day gone, just to square an account you never truly understood in the first place. And here's the strangest part. Everyone accepts it. You, your neighbors, the reeve himself. No one believes the system is fair, but it is old, and therefore unchallengeable. It has the weight of tradition, of law, of divine order, or so you're told. The ledger closes with a dull thud. The reeve leaves. You watch him walk to the next door, and you feel the familiar sensation settle over you. That dull weight in your chest. That weariness not from labor, but from knowing how little of your labor is actually yours. The sky outside has brightened. Another day begins. You still have your field, your goat, your hearth, but not your freedom, not your peace. Because no matter how hard you work, the tax is always coming, and you'll never quite understand how much you truly owe. You've had a cough for weeks now. It started as a tickle, a dry scratch in the back of your throat that came and went with the smoke from the hearth. But now it wakes you at night, clutches your chest in the morning, and drains your strength by midday. You're not alone. Your youngest has the same cough. So does your neighbor, though his has turned wet and deep, rattling like stones in a bucket. You don't have a name for the illness. It's just the wheeze, or the cold rot, or the wind cough. But you know it well. It visits every year, usually after the frost has set in and the smoke from every hearth in the village sinks low and hangs in the lungs like fog. There is no physician here, only a local healer, known in hushed tones as the herb wife. She's old, hunched, and smells of damp bark and bitter roots. Some swear she's wise. Others mutter that her hands are too cold to trust. You go anyway. Her cottage is on the edge of the woods. Small, crooked, and covered in moss. Inside, it smells like boiled leaves and old fire. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the beams, brushing your head as you duck inside. She doesn't greet you with kindness, just a look, sharp and knowing. She presses your wrist, examines your tongue, and squints into your eyes. Then, she mutters something under her breath, maybe a charm, maybe just a complaint about the damp, and begins rummaging through jars. You leave with a bundle of herbs tied in twine, a warning not to eat pork until the next full moon, and instructions to boil the leaves, breathe in the steam, then drink the water once it cools. She says it will pull the sickness out. You try it that night. The steam burns your nose, and the taste of the brew is like boiled moss and iron. You gag, but drink it anyway. Whether it helps or not, it's hard to say. The cough remains. The child still wheezes. There is no true medicine, no antibiotics, no germ theory. Illness is thought to be a punishment or an imbalance of humors, or perhaps bad air from the swamps. You try everything: garlic rubbed on the chest, chicken broth with ash, dried toad tied around the neck. Some people swear by bleeding, others by fasting, none by results. And yet, you endure. Because what else can you do? If the sickness worsens, you might visit the monastery infirmary. But they take few peasants, and only if you offer labor or coin. Even then, they might treat you with prayer and penance, urging you to confess, to cleanse the soul while the body decays. So instead, you rest, as much as the labor allows. You drink the herbs. You chew the bitter bark. You breathe the smoke and try to convince yourself it's clearing the lungs, not blackening them. Your child sleeps beside you, coughing softly. You whisper a charm you half remember from your mother, a rhyme said to ward off the black wind. And you hope it passes. Hope it doesn't turn into something worse. Hope that, this year, illness visits, but doesn't stay. Because in the Middle Ages, even a simple cough can be a sentence. And healing? Healing is more luck than medicine. The sun hasn't risen, but your feet are already on the path. You carry a bundle of firewood, rough branches stacked and strapped together with twine, pressing hard into your back with each step. The twine digs into your palms. Your boots are damp from the morning dew and already starting to rub your heels raw. You're walking to the market town, 2 villages away. Not because you want to, but because you have to. The Lord's steward expects firewood delivered once every 2 weeks. Your family owes it as part of your land's obligation. You've made this walk dozens of times before. You could trace the path in your sleep, over the mossy ridge, along the shallow brook, and through the birchwood that creaks with every gust of wind. A boy pushing a cart with a broken wheel. A woman with a bundle of flax. A priest on horseback who doesn't make eye contact. No one speaks more than they must. Each person carries something: food, goods, offerings, tools. In the Middle Ages, movement is labor, not leisure. After a while, your thoughts grow quieter. The rhythm of your steps and breath creates a kind of lull. The weight on your back becomes just another part of your body. You stop noticing the ache in your shoulders. You hum a half-remembered tune to keep your pace steady. At last, the trees thin out. Ahead, you see the low stone walls of the market village. Thin spires of smoke curl from the chimneys. You smell roasting grain, dung, and damp stone. A man by the gate nods. You've passed here before. He doesn't ask questions. He knows. Everyone here owes something to someone. You deliver your wood and receive a small token in return, perhaps a bit of salt, or a measure of flour, or the simple satisfaction of knowing you've met your quota this week. Barely. You rest for only a moment. Then it's time to turn around. Back along the same path. Over the same moss. Through the same woods. Because in the Middle Ages, even a short errand can be a full day's journey. And what you carry is never just firewood. You carry debt, duty, and the weight of survival. It starts before the sun is up. Not the eating, the measuring, the thinking, the quiet staring at a wooden shelf in a dark room, calculating whether the barley sack will last the week, or whether you'll need to start adding sawdust again. You don't call it breakfast. No one does. In your world, there's no such thing as 3 meals a day. Most days, there's just one, maybe 2, if the weather is mild and the firewood supply is good. Maybe half a meal if the grain bin says so. You're used to it. Everyone is. It doesn't mean you aren't hungry. It just means you don't complain. Because hunger isn't a passing discomfort in the Middle Ages. It's a permanent background hum, as familiar and unremarkable as your shadow. Today's meal will be pottage again, a thick, grayish-brown porridge made from whatever you've managed to grow, forage, or barter for. It's a constant. In your childhood, you ate pottage. As a grown worker, you eat pottage. If you grow old, God's willing, you will still eat pottage. But every day it's slightly different. One day it might have a hint of turnip. Another, a handful of dried peas. If you're truly lucky, the kind of lucky that happens once a season, someone throws in a knuckle of salted pork or a marrow bone, and the whole thing tastes like celebration. The smell of the pot over the fire is comforting, but only because it's warm. The scent is earthy, smoky, vaguely sour. It clings to your clothes, your breath, your bedding. You don't notice anymore. There is no variety. No, what are you in the mood for today? You eat what's available. That's it. You sit on a low stool near the hearth with your bowl carved from ash wood, the rim worn soft by years of fingers gripping it, tipping it, scraping it dry. The wooden spoon is stained dark, and only yours if no one else in the family needs it first. You chew slowly. The barley is chewy, sometimes hard at the center. A stray stone from the grinding process might crack your tooth. You've seen it happen. You know people with rotting gums and blackened molars, not from sugar, but from decades of chewing rough, coarse bread and grain mixed with millstone dust. The bread, too, is nothing like modern bread. It's dense, heavy, sour, made from rye, if you're lucky, but often barley or oats, mixed with whatever coarse flour you can manage. No yeast, no oven of your own. You bake it in the communal oven, and sometimes the baker takes a cut just for firing it. When you eat it, your jaw aches by the end. And the bread? You guard it. It's one of the only things that stores well. You hide it from mice, from neighbors, from your own children when the winter bites hardest. Meat is rare, so rare that when it's present, everything else stops. You remember once, in your 16th year, Someone slaughtered a pig for a wedding. You remember the taste of roasted fat, the juices that ran down your chin. You remember licking your fingers and hoping no one noticed. You remember how the scent lingered in your nose for days after, like a dream. You might see meat again at Yuletide or during Harvest Feast if the tax collection wasn't too harsh. Maybe someone will catch a rabbit. Maybe a sick chicken will be butchered before it goes to waste. But more often, your protein comes from things you wouldn't wish on anyone: cold beans, dried peas with worms picked out, a few mushrooms gathered at risk from the edge of the woods, blood pudding, made once a year if the Lord allows slaughter. Milk, eggs, and cheese are equally fleeting. You might keep a hen if predators or thieves don't get to it first. The milk from your goat is thin and stops flowing in winter. And when the goat grows old and dry, that's that. There is no long-term storage. You don't have jars. You don't have vinegar, except what you might trade for. You don't have cold cellars, only pits, packed with straw, hoping to keep tubers from rot. Food isn't food. It's obligation. It's calculation. It's a quiet panic you carry in your chest every time a rainstorm hits your barley crop or mold appears in your oat bin. If one season goes badly, just one, there is no cushion, no safety net, no bank supply. Your neighbors begin making do, which is to say, they begin starving carefully. They eat their seed grain. They boil the bark off certain trees. They start mixing clay into flour to make it stretch. And you've seen it, haven't you? You've seen what happens when hunger goes too far. Children with sunken eyes, chewing on grass. Men collapsing in the fields mid-harvest. Old women dying quietly with bellies full of boiled nettles and nothing else. So yes, you eat pottage again, and again, and again, because pottage means you're still surviving. It means you've outlasted another week. It means you get to try again tomorrow. And tomorrow, there might be a turnip in the pot, or a radish, or a rumor that someone caught a goose. And the fire will burn, and the barley will bubble, and you'll chew, and chew, and chew. Because in the Middle Ages, food is never about pleasure. It's about endurance. And those who endure longest, they aren't full, just less hungry than the rest. The year may be turning, but it feels like it never left. Because in the Middle Ages, winter isn't a season. It's a constant threat, a presence, a shadow that never fully lifts. Even in summer, when the fields are green and the sun rises early, you think about winter. Because winter is when people die. It begins before the first snow. You feel it in the shortening of days, the quiet panic in the village when a cool wind cuts through the harvest. You feel it in your bones, and in the glances your neighbors give to their dwindling supplies. You feel it in your stomach, already bracing to shrink. There is no insulation in your home. The walls are wattle and daub, thin, cracking, patched with mud and horsehair. The wind finds every gap. You've stuffed straw in the corners, hung cloth from pegs, banked the fire under ash to last the night. Still, it gets through. It always gets through. The roof leaks. The thatch above your head, heavy with frost, begins to drip as the fire warms the room. Your bedding, a coarse wool blanket and a layer of old clothes, smells of smoke and damp. There's no mattress, just straw over packed earth. You curl up tighter. You hear the sounds of winter before you see them. The crack of frozen wood splitting under pressure. The slow, sticky grind of ice on the path. The cough of your neighbor, getting worse. Outside, water has turned to glass. The stream by the village is a black ribbon under thin ice, and your only bucket cracked from cold 2 weeks ago. Now you carry water in clay jugs that leak if handled wrong. Your hands bleed from the cold, but you barely notice anymore. You still have to work. Winter doesn't mean rest. It means different labor. Now you're chopping firewood every morning just to keep the hearth breathing. You're digging out the goat's pen. You're hauling sacks of damp barley across frozen earth. The same calluses split open again and again. Your breath fogs the air inside the house. Your fingers are too stiff to sew. Your feet haven't been dry in days. You boil pottage, again, but now the vegetables are from storage, half-rotten turnips, wrinkled leeks, dried beans that won't soften. The flavor is earth and smoke. Always. You water it down to stretch it further. Every day, the pot gets a little thinner. Some nights you don't eat at all. There's just not enough. You wake to frost forming on the inside of the door. Sometimes, in the coldest weeks, it forms on your blanket. The baby cries in the night, not from hunger, not from fear, just from cold. You rock them, arms stiff, humming an old song to distract yourself from the knowledge that there's nothing more you can do. And every morning begins the same question. Will this be the day the fire doesn't relight? Wood is scarce now. You cut it green weeks ago. It hisses and smokes, barely catching. You've begun burning things you swore you wouldn't. A broken stool, part of a fence, a woven basket no longer usable. Even dry dung, if it's cold enough. You try not to burn it all too fast. Spring is still a long way off. Sometimes the winter kills in silence. An older man doesn't wake one morning. His heart simply gave up. A child goes to bed with a cough and never opens her eyes. A woman slips while fetching water, breaks her leg, and no one can help. The infection comes fast in the cold. You don't cry. You don't scream. You just bury them in the frozen ground, if it will yield to your spade. If not, you wait. Even death waits in winter. But winter isn't always dramatic. It's not always wolves or snowdrifts. More often, it's just slow. A slow weakening of the body. A slow quieting of the village. A slow erosion of strength. It is the smoke that never fully clears. The frost that lingers into late morning. It's the knowledge that there is no doctor coming. No fuel shipment. No backup supply of bread. And even in good winters, even in survivable winters, the fear doesn't leave. Because you know what it costs to make it through. And you know that next winter is already watching. Even in July, when the sun is high and the wheat grows gold, you're still stacking firewood, still salting meat, still eyeing the sky for early clouds. Because in the Middle Ages, winter isn't something you prepare for. It's something you never truly escape. It waits, and it always returns. Colder, harsher, quieter. Your head is pounding. A dull, aching pressure behind the eyes. Your stomach has been turning for days, and you haven't kept down much food. Your limbs feel heavy, and the cold is crawling under your skin. You are sick. And in the Middle Ages, that means something very different than it does now. Because there are no clinics, no doctors with charts and degrees, no pills, no antibiotics, no sterile gauze or fluids. There's just the body, the pain, the fear, and the remedies, if you can call them that. You lie still on your straw mat, swaddled in old cloth, too weak to move. A neighbor has gone to fetch someone, not a physician, because those only exist in the cities, and they charge silver for a single glance. No, what's coming is the local wise woman, or perhaps a monk from the abbey, if the weather allows the walk. But they won't bring much. They'll look at your tongue. They'll sniff the pot you used last night. They might say you've caught a chill, or an imbalance of the humors, those ancient bodily fluids, black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. To them, healing is about balance, not cause. You're coughing? That's too much phlegm. Too hot? That's bile. Too sad? That's black bile again. There's always a theory. But the solution? It usually starts with a blade. Drop of blood the bleeding, they call it bloodletting. And it's more common than bread. You don't even have to be sick to get bled. Many people are bled regularly to maintain balance. You lie there, lightheaded, cold, and pale, as the blood drains slowly, ounce by ounce. Some healers use leeches instead, not because they're more effective, but because they're easier. You can keep leeches in a jar by the hearth. You simply place one on the patient's skin and let it drink. They swell, black and glossy, with blood, then drop off. You try not to watch. not for comfort, for protection. They tell stories of plagues, of strange swellings, of houses where everyone died and the door was sealed forever. Even common illness is treated with fear. You're lucky, perhaps, that your illness isn't more serious. Because if it were, say, a tooth abscess or a broken bone, the treatment would be worse. A rotting tooth? They pull it with iron tongs. You might think of privacy as a quiet room, a closed door, a space to breathe, to think. But in the Middle Ages, privacy was not a right. It wasn't even an idea. You live in a small, one-room dwelling. A dirt floor, low ceiling, and rough-hewn beams that creak when the wind blows. Your parents sleep on the only straw pallet. Your siblings, all 6 of them, sleep on rushes in the corner. You sleep wherever there's space. There are no bedrooms, no screens, no dividing curtains unless you're rich, and even then, only to keep out the draft. Everything happens in front of everyone else. When you eat together. One pot, one ladle, no plates. When you dress, you do so with your back turned, or you don't bother. You wash your face in the same basin your brother just used for his feet. You share everything. There's no room for modesty. Toilet, what about the bathroom? There isn't one. You use a chamber pot, if you're lucky. A ceramic bowl, tucked in a corner. When it's full, someone, usually the youngest, walks it out and dumps it into the ditch behind the house. Sometimes you use the edge of the field, sometimes a stream. At night, you try to hold it. In winter, you have to. There are no doors to lock, no toilet paper, just rags, or moss, or straw. And the smell? You stop noticing, because it's everywhere. The stables, the streets, even inside your home, especially in summer, when heat brings everything to the surface. In towns, there are public latrines, built over rivers or pits. Some people use them, others don't bother. In London, a street called Shitterburn Lane is named for the stream of waste that ran down its length. You walk carefully. You breathe through your sleeve. Soap washing and bathing baths happen occasionally, very occasionally. You might wash your face every few days. Your body? Only when there's a festival or a wedding, maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Maybe. In cities, there are bathhouses, but they aren't private either. Men and women often bathe together, at least until the church frowns on it. A big wooden tub, a heated room, and dozens of strangers scrubbing themselves in the same cloudy water. Even the nobility, who can afford more, don't bathe often. They powder themselves, perfume their linens, change their underclothes more often than they wash their skin. And that underlayer? It's not a secret. It's seen hanging from windows and fences. Because everyone does their laundry in the open. Bed sharing of bedbeds are scarce. Inns often rent them by the half. You might find yourself curled beside a stranger, back to back, both trying to sleep through the snoring and the stench. In castles, the lord sleeps in one room with his closest attendants nearby. Courtiers and visitors lie side by side on pallets. Even kings don't sleep alone. In peasant homes, entire families share one bed. Grandparents, children, sometimes a goat to keep warm. You grow up knowing the shape of everyone's back, their breathing rhythms, their coughs and twitches. There is no escape, no place to cry without being heard, no conversation that isn't overheard, no touch that goes unnoticed. Brain, even thoughts aren't private, there are no journals, no personal letters, unless you're wealthy and literate. And even then, messengers read what they carry. Monks copy it. Priests might hear it in confession. Your thoughts? They belong to God and to the community. A strange idea to us. But in the Middle Ages, the village watches everything. If you spend too much time alone, people ask why. If you walk in the woods, they wonder what you're hiding. If you whisper, they listen harder. Privacy is not protection. It's suspicion. Waxing crescent moon, the weight of being seen, there's something peaceful about it. In a way, you're never alone. You're never left behind. But there's also pressure. To behave. To conform. To live as part of the body, not apart from it. No one dreams of a room of their own. There's no word for introvert. No place to scream. No safe space to imagine without judgment. Only company. All the time. For better or for worse. So next time you close your bedroom door, or sit quietly with your thoughts, or take a long, silent shower, remember, in the Middle Ages, those simple things would be unthinkable luxuries. To be alone, that would be suspicious, or sacred, or insane, but never normal. There's no such thing as, what do you want to be when you grow up? That question doesn't exist here. Because in the Middle Ages, you don't choose your job chooses you. And more often than not, you're born into it. Your father is a thatcher. You will be a thatcher. Your mother spins wool. So will you. There are no applications, no career changes, no second chances. There's simply the work and your place in it. You begin young, not at 18, not even at 13. You start when your hands are strong enough to carry kindling, or turn a spit, or tie bundles of rushes. By age 7 or 8, you're not a child. You're an assistant. By 12, you're full-time. Not paid? Of course, you work as part of the household economy. Because if you don't, someone else has to do double. The guilds and the grind. If you're in a town, maybe, just maybe, you become an apprentice. You're sent to live with a master craftsman, a blacksmith, a cooper, a baker, a weaver. For 7 years, you eat their food, sleep in their loft, follow their rules. You work from sunup to sundown. You run errands. You watch. You scrub tools. You earn nothing. But if you're lucky and obedient, you'll be allowed to advance. First to journeyman, then, years later, perhaps master. That is, if you can afford the entrance fees and prove your skill. But most never do. For most people, guilds are as exclusive as nobility. Protected, political, expensive. The poor remain poor. The rich stay in charge. Field work never ends. If you're a peasant, as most are, then your job is not specialized. Your job is everything. In spring, you plow. In summer, you shear sheep. In autumn, you thresh and store. In winter, you repair what's broken. You fix your own roof. You mend your only pair of boots. You tan hides, mend fences, dig trenches, chase away birds. And when the Lord's steward calls, you drop everything and work his land instead. That's called corvée, unpaid, mandatory labor. You owe it because you exist. You can't negotiate. You can't ask for fewer hours. You can't say you're not feeling well. No one cares. Because the cow still needs milking. The hay won't stack itself. And if you don't show up, the others carry your weight. And they won't forgive you. No days off. You think Sunday means rest. Technically, yes. But practically, that's the day you catch up on your own work. Sharpen your scythe. Fix the roof. Tend the herbs. Even your holy day is full of chores. There are festivals, saints' days, market days, but those are rare. And work doesn't stop before or after them. It just shifts shape. You work every day until your body gives out, until your hands are curled with arthritis, or your back bends and stays bent, until your teeth fall out from age or infection. Then what? There's no retirement. No pension. You rely on your children, assuming you lived long enough to have any that survived. If not, you beg. You sweep floors. You do light tasks for food. You become part of the invisible poor, passed by without a glance. Bound to the land in many regions, you are a serf, tied to the estate where you were born. Not a slave, not exactly, but not free either. You can't leave without permission. You can't marry without approval. You can't sell your labor to someone else. You belong, legally, to the lord of the manor. If he dies, you are transferred. If the land is sold, you go with it, like furniture. You could work harder than anyone in the village. You could harvest more, sow straighter seams, wake earlier, and sweat longer. And you'd still be bound. There is no ladder, no promotion, no better offer waiting in the next town. Because in the Middle Ages, a job is not a role, it's an identity. It's etched into your hands, your spine, your status, your soul. To quit? That would be unimaginable. To want more? That would be dangerous. Ambition is not noble. It's threatening. So you do what your father did, what his father did, and what your children will one day do, unless they starve or leave or are conscripted into war. You keep your head down. You keep your mouth shut. You keep going. Because if you stop, everything else stops too. And the only reward for labor in the Middle Ages is survival. You're exhausted. Your arms ache. Your feet are calloused. Your back is tight and bent from hours spent hauling, scraping, stooping. The sun is down. The day is done. And now, finally, it's time to sleep. But in the Middle Ages, sleep doesn't mean rest. It just means the work stops for a few hours. You crawl into a bed you didn't choose. If you're lucky, it's a straw pallet, dry, somewhat soft, and full of lice. If you're not lucky, it's a pile of hay. If you're a servant, a bench. If you're poor, the dirt. There's no pillow, maybe a folded cloth under your head. A single wool blanket, shared between 2 or 3 bodies. The air is cold, and the wind slides in through the cracks in the thatch. If you sleep with animals, and many do, the heat helps. Chickens under the cot, a goat at your feet, a dog pressed into your side. The stink, however, is constant. No lights, just darkness. Footsteps on the path, creaking carts, a baby crying, a scream in the distance, and no one dares go check. You pull the blanket up tighter. Try not to think. Try not to listen. Sleep won't come easily. But then again, you don't expect it to. Broken sleep, first and second medieval sleep, isn't continuous. It comes in 2 shifts. First sleep begins not long after nightfall. You drift off early, worn out, long before midnight. Then you wake in the middle of the night. Not fully, not alert, but conscious. A few hours of stillness. Often, it's used to tend the fire. Say prayers. Talk quietly. Relieve yourself. Sometimes, to work. In this strange half-state, not night, not morning, you might think. Dream, reflect, or shiver. Then, sometime later, you slip into second sleep. It carries you to dawn, or near enough, unless something wakes you, which is likely, because the night is full of interruptions. The small torments insects are constant companions. Fleas nest in your mattress. Lice nest in your hair. Bedbugs crawl from the beams. You scratch. You turn. You sigh. You live with it. In winter, your breath hangs in the air. In summer, the sweat glues your tunic to your skin. In spring, the thatch leaks. In autumn, the mice are bold. You never wake refreshed. Only no longer asleep. Towns and taverns, if you live in a town or near an inn, it's worse. Drunken voices drift in from the street. Arguments. Singing. Laughter. Clattering carts at midnight. Barking dogs. Drunks urinating in the alley. In cities like London or Paris, there's no curfew people truly obey, and the streets are too narrow for silence. There's always movement, always noise, even in the dark. And if you live above a shop, a weaver, a cobbler, a butcher, you smell it, hear it, feel the footfalls in the floorboards. There's no insulation, no barrier, no peace. What about the rich? The wealthy sleep differently. Feather beds, carved bed frames, silks sometimes, curtains around the bed to block the cold, servants to stoke the fire. But even here, sleep is not private. You're rarely alone. Attendants sleep nearby, a dog at the foot of the bed. You might share the room with your steward, your children, your guards. And even if the linens are soft, the problems are louder. Political unrest, fear of assassins, rumors of plague, a messenger banging at the door with news from the border. The rich sleep lighter than anyone, because they know how easily it can all fall apart. The slow return of light, eventually, the birds begin. A soft call from the hedgerow, a rooster if you're near a yard, the gentle creak of someone getting up before the others, the snap of kindling in the hearth. Morning comes slowly. The sky turns iron gray, then pale, then faintly gold. And so, groggy, stiff, and aching, you rise. Not because you're ready, but because there is no choice. The fire must be stoked, the animals fed, the bread begun, the fields checked. The day has started, and sleep, like everything else in the Middle Ages, was never meant to be easy. In the medieval world, marriage isn't a love story. It's not about affection or choice. It's a contract made by others, and once it's sealed, there's no going back. You don't marry who you want. You marry who you're told. And for most people, that marriage begins early. For girls, as young as 12. For boys, 14 or 15, sometimes older, depending on what their family can afford. You don't fall in love. You get traded. A dowry, not a dream if you're a daughter. You're an investment, one that comes with a cost. Your father must pay a dowry to get you married off. Land, livestock, coin, linens, labor. The richer the dowry, the better the match. And if your family is poor, your options shrink. You may be married off to an older widower, a man 3 times your age, simply because he'll take you without demanding more. Or worse, no one marries you at all. You become a burden, a spinster, a source of shame, another mouth to feed in a world that can barely feed itself. Marriage for men, a means to land. If you're a man, you don't get to choose either. To marry, you must first have land, or at least the means to support a wife. If you're a serf, a landless laborer, or still dependent on your family, you don't marry, not unless someone higher up arranges it for you. Even then, your marriage is not yours to define. It is a social tool, a way to connect families, to produce heirs, to bind loyalties. And once you're married, there's no stepping back. You're trapped. Legally and spiritually, divorce is almost impossible. The church sees marriage as sacred and indissoluble. Unless the marriage was never consummated, or one party was already secretly married to someone else, you're locked in. No matter the abuse, no matter the misery, no matter how cruel or cold or absent your partner may be. Women, especially, have no legal ground. A wife cannot leave her husband. She cannot own property independently. She cannot work, travel, or even speak in legal matters without his permission. And if she tries, she risks being labeled a scold, a whore, or worse, a witch. Motherhood by compulsion. From the moment the vows are said, the expectation is clear: bear children, and bear them quickly. Most women in the Middle Ages give birth to 8, 10, sometimes 15 children. But many, most, in fact, do not live to raise them all. Children die. Mothers die. Birth is not a miracle. It's a threat. There are no doctors, no hospitals, only midwives, herbs, whispered prayers, and every labor could be your last. Fever, bleeding, infection. There is no anesthesia, no sanitation, no second chances. Even if you survive, you must heal quickly, because another pregnancy is likely coming. And again, until your body gives out. You're watched. Always there is no privacy in marriage. No sanctuary. Neighbors gossip. The church watches. The Lord counts your children and taxes you accordingly. Even your fertility is a matter of public interest. If you haven't conceived after a year, whispers begin. Blame follows. And often, it lands on the woman. If you're barren, you're a failure. If you're widowed, you're dangerous. If you're single, especially past 20, you're suspect. Marriage doesn't shield you. It exposes you. There is no escape. You cannot choose not to marry. You cannot choose who you marry. You cannot choose to leave. You cannot love freely. You cannot speak openly. You cannot dream of more. If you're lucky, you marry someone kind. If you're not, you endure. And you endure in silence. Because in the Middle Ages, marriage is not about you. It's about survival, reputation, obligation, and control. It's not about happiness. It's about duty. And if you think modern relationships are complicated, you still wouldn't last a single day in the world where love never had a chance to begin. Close your eyes and imagine this. You haven't bathed in 2 weeks. Neither has anyone around you. And the smell? That's not unusual. It's expected. In the Middle Ages, cleanliness wasn't just rare. It was feared. Water. Too risky to use, we assume. Today, that bathing is healthy. A way to relax, to refresh, to stay well. But in medieval Europe, many believed the opposite. Bathing opened your pores, they thought, made your body vulnerable to miasmas. Invisible, foul airs that carried sickness. To many, exposure to water was a health hazard. So what do? You wait. You sponge. You change your shirt. But rarely, very rarely, do you immerse yourself in water. Public bathhouses, risky, raucous, and then gone. In some cities, particularly in the earlier Middle Ages, there were bathhouses. Men and women would sometimes bathe together, though often separated by time slots. But over time, these places earned reputations, and not for hygiene. They were places of vice, of prostitution, of immorality. The church cracked down. Plagues arrived. And suddenly, bathhouses became suspicious. Did the bathhouse make you clean or sick? Better to stay dry, they thought. Better to change your linen more often. After all, linen pulled the dirt away. So they wore undergarments and changed them, but not their bodies. Not often. Some nobles might bathe a few times a year, others less. Queen Isabella of Castile was praised in her lifetime for only bathing twice in her life. Once when she was born, and once before she was married. This was not unusual. This was admired. Your bath. If you're lucky, suppose you do decide to bathe. You'll need a wooden tub, a servant to bring buckets of water, time to heat that water over a fire, a cloth or sponge, herbs if you're fancy, a little privacy, which is rare. You sit in this lukewarm pool for just a few minutes. Maybe it helps, maybe not. By the time your water is ready, it's already cooling. And the effort? Immense. You may not try again for months. And if you're poor, no tub, no firewood to spare, no water to waste. Instead, you wipe your face, your hands, and your feet and call it a day. This is your hygiene routine, and it's the same for most people around you. The smell was normal. Everyone smelled. It wasn't rude. It wasn't shameful. It was reality. You covered it with herbs. You burned rosemary. You carried oranges with cloves stuck into the rind. You powdered your hair with chalk and flour dust. But it didn't erase the truth. Sweat, dirt, smoke, rot. They clung to you as tightly as your tunic. And so you learned to stop noticing. You learned to tolerate. Because even clean water, the kind you could drink or trust, was scarce. You'd never drink from the river downstream. You might get sick. Wells were safer, but not always. Contaminated water, poor waste management, and no real understanding of germs meant. The cleaner you tried to be, sometimes the sicker you got. Cleanliness equals danger. Bathing could literally kill you, they thought. Because many who bathed before plague, before infection, got sick shortly after. Of course, we now know the real cause was likely the water source, or the filth around them. But they didn't. So they chose safety. And to them, safety meant staying dry. That might sound strange now, even repulsive. But in a world without antibiotics, without antiseptics, and without a real sense of hygiene science, fear shaped your habits. And for medieval people, a bath was more terrifying than a stink. Forget lawyers. Forget Miranda rights. Forget presumption of innocence. In the Middle Ages, justice didn't wait. It didn't hesitate, and it almost never forgave. You don't get a fair trial. You get a spectacle, a public warning, and sometimes a gruesome end. Caught. You're guilty. The concept of being innocent until proven guilty didn't exist. In many places, especially in rural Europe, if you were accused, you were presumed guilty. Especially if you were poor, or foreign, or disliked. Your neighbors could turn on you. Rumors could convict you. And if you didn't confess, there were ways to make you talk. Trial by ordeal. One of the most terrifying practices was trial by ordeal, where guilt or innocence was decided not by evidence, but by how you responded to pain. You might be forced to hold a red-hot iron bar and walk several steps. Your hand is then bandaged. If it heals cleanly in a few days, you're innocent. If not, guilty. Be tied up and thrown into a river. If you sank, you were innocent, but probably drowned. If you floated, you were guilty and pulled out for punishment. Plunge your hand into boiling water, reaching for a stone at the bottom. Your burns were later inspected by clergy for signs of divine favor. This was considered justice. And worse, it was believed to be God's judgment. Your wounds were not medical matters. They were messages. Punishments were physical, always no prison sentences, no rehabilitation programs. Medieval justice believed in visible consequences, and the goal wasn't just to punish, it was to deter. So punishments were floggings in public squares, branding with hot irons, amputations of ears, noses, hands. The stocks, where you'd be locked by the neck and wrists in a public place, sometimes for days, tongue removal for slander, execution by hanging, beheading, or burning for crimes like theft, heresy, or treason, and all of it happened outdoors in front of a crowd. The more brutal, the better remembered. Justice was theater, and you were either the audience or the example. Everyone watched. No one helped. Executions were social events. Townspeople gathered in the square. Children were brought to watch. Merchants sold food nearby. The condemned was paraded through the street, mocked, beaten, spat upon. Some people were forced to dig their own graves. Others had to apologize to the crowd before the noose was tightened. If you were noble, perhaps you'd get a clean beheading with a sharp sword. If not, you might hang, and not cleanly. Sometimes the rope was too long. Sometimes not long enough. Sometimes the executioner missed. There were no second chances, only slow ones. Surveillance through fear. Justice wasn't just about criminals. It was about control. The system kept everyone afraid, of each other, of the church, of the Lord, of doing or saying the wrong thing. Whispers could be evidence. Odd behavior could be proof. A grudge could be fatal. You walked a narrow path, always careful, always quiet, because one false step could cost you everything, even if you were innocent. And if you were a peasant, your voice carried no weight. The sheriff didn't come to help you. The courts didn't exist for you. You were born into obedience and expected to die with it. You wake up with an empty stomach. That's normal. You went to bed that way too. Because in the Middle Ages, food wasn't just sustenance. It was a worry, a daily source of stress, and sometimes the difference between life and death. You ate what you could, when you could, and never quite enough. What did you eat? Mostly bread. If you're a peasant, your diet revolves around bread, but not the fluffy, warm kind you imagine. This bread is heavy, dark, coarse, sometimes filled with bits of dirt, straw, or ground-up bark to stretch it further. It's made from rye, barley, or oats. Wheat is expensive, reserved for the rich. You soak it in broth if it's stale, or scrape off the mold if it's turned. Every crumb matters. The meal plan, such as it was. On a lucky day, here's what you might eat. Morning, A bit of cold porridge or rough bread with ale midday. A vegetable pottage, a stew of whatever you've grown or foraged. Evening, more bread, perhaps with onions, garlic, or a scrap of cheese if you have it meat. Almost never. That's for nobles. Or feast days, rare moments when the village shares a pig or bird. Otherwise, your protein comes from beans. And hope. Spoiled meat. Rotten ale if you do get meat. It's not fresh. There's no refrigeration. No proper storage. So it's heavily salted. Or smoked. Or dried into toughness. Sometimes, it's already begun to turn, but you eat it anyway. You have to. Ale is more common than water, and often safer. Water from streams and rivers could carry disease. Even children drink ale, though it's weaker than what we know today. It's brewed quickly, poorly filtered, and often murky. But it fills the stomach. Sort of. Hunger doesn't mean famine. At first, the threat of famine looms constantly. But you don't need a full famine to feel hunger. A bad harvest, a hard winter, a local raid, or simply poor luck. Any of these can tip your village into food shortage. And when food runs low, you start stretching flour with tree bark. You forage for roots and nettles. You eat boiled weeds. You drink broth made from bones that have already been used. Then, when things get worse, you trade clothes. You sell your tools. You beg. And in some cases, you bury the smallest ones first. The Great Famine and countless small ones. From 1315 to 1317, the Great Famine struck much of Europe. Rain fell for months. Crops drowned. Livestock died. Salted meat ran out. Millions starved. Entire villages vanished. Cannibalism was whispered about, and maybe more than whispered. But smaller, quieter famines happen all the time. In the 10th century, the 12th, the 14th, year after year, somewhere, someone was starving, and the poor always suffered most. They had no stockpiles, no land to spare, no help from above, just hunger, constant, gnawing cold. If you were rich, still risky even if you were noble, your food was no guarantee of safety. Sure, you had meat, and spices, and honey, and large feasts, but food safety? Still primitive. Food could spoil. Bread could be contaminated with ergot, a toxic fungus that causes hallucinations and seizures. Your cook might not wash his hands. Your wine might sour. Your water might be poisoned. And if you were overeager, like many nobles were, you might die of gout, obesity, or food poisoning. Because in the Middle Ages, even abundance could be a curse.